of all, I wanted to thank everybody for joining our weekly virtual tech chat called the Coffee Break. It's a technology series. We do it on a weekly basis, talking about new technology trends, how businesses are integrating new technologies, and just trying to keep some good content for our customers and prospective customers. So today I am going to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Peter Niebler. How you doing this morning, Peter?
I'm great. Great. Thanks,
Good.
Josh.
Good. So as you can see by this slide, my name is Josh Moore. I'll be your host today. Peter and I are both senior solution architects for Levity IT and work quite closely on all things Azure. So today's session is going to be back to basics, Azure fundamentals, and we're really going to be digging in and discussing how organizations that are used to having on-prem systems maybe want to dip their foot in the water of cloud compute, what that journey looks like for those customers. And with that, why don't we dig in? So, Peter, thank you for joining me today. Azure and the cloud computing can be a really intimidating system for somebody that's keeping all of their systems on-prem. Where does a company start, and kind of walk me through what is the most common use case for Azure in a small and medium-sized business?
Sure. So where I see that is really two-part answer to that. The quick short answer is most companies get in on storage, Azure storage, and Azure storage in and of itself is kind of this, big area. It's really more, what are you doing with that storage and what underlying technologies are you using? So for example, backup, in the past, people either took tapes offsite or hard drives offsite or, to get their offsite backup, and cloud storage is a really good option and convenient option to get rid of those hassles of the tapes and the hard drives and keep things secure, and have an offsite copy of your backup. So that, storage is really that short answer where I see people dipping their toe in the water, getting started with some type of cloud service integrating with their on-premise system. But more than that is, I don't like the question of what should I use Azure for, as much as what's my business problem and how can Azure solve that? So I usually just kind of assume Azure can do almost everything for our customers. Now it can't, I realize that, but it's been hard pressed to find things, that it can't do. So I like to start with that business problem. What are we trying to solve here? And then find the best tool for that job. Make sense?
Yeah, and I always find the same, right? If you're just configuring it without having a problem, that's technology for technology's sake. Yeah, good strategy to have a clear problem statement before digging in. So thank you for that. As you look at the landscape of cloud providers, you get not only second tier providers, but you have first tier providers like Amazon or Google Cloud. Kind of when you look at the cloud marketplace, what are a few differentiators of Azure and their cloud-based solution?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm so integrated with Azure, but where I start there is I'm going back to my first answer, where find the best tool for the job. Azure might not be the right solution. I know Amazon's really good in DevOps, and you might have a guy that's doing development for you for some kind of application, and he knows Amazon. Well, stick with Amazon then. But for the most of our companies where they're either trying to move their servers up there or have some kind of security implementation, all these clouds providers have a good base of these services. It kind of reminds me of I don't know, McDonald's or Burger King, right? You can get a hamburger
Yeah.
at both, but does one fit your business better than the other? And where I see Azure separating itself is, um, well, security, but we can touch on that later. But that all starts with identity management to me. You know, Microsoft has been the king in Active Directory, identity management being like your users and logins. Um, they've been the king with Active Directory for a long time. A lot of people that use like Google Cloud Services still go back to Azure AD for their logins, and securing that. So I think Azure just has a foothold in that. Everybody needs identity management, and they do that really well. So it's really attractive to me to start with Azure there because you need that piece of it. Second to that is, and it ties in a little bit, is we all thought we were just going to pick up and move to the cloud. You know, we've had a lot of customers come to us and say, hey, we want a cloud strategy. We don't know how to do that. Help us move to the cloud. And they, you know, people don't totally understand what that means. And we thought we were just going to be like, okay, let's move everything to the cloud. And the reality of what happened is most people ended up with somewhat of a hybrid scenario. Whether that meant you had like an application that just didn't work really well in the cloud and you had to keep that on-prem, but you had a mobile workforce and you needed to share files very easily. So you needed both. Microsoft does that scenario very well, you know, starting with that identity management, syncing that up to the cloud, and keeping that all secure, within that. They do that very well. So that identity management and the ability to do hybrids very easily are two very appealing things for me, moving to Azure over the others.
Yeah, and I really find the identity management, you hit the nail on the head with, you know, Active Directory has been the primary way that people have managed these identities. Being able to extend that into the cloud, you know, not only very valuable for organizations, but also being able to tie in single sign-on, you know, from a security aspect, being able to extend out your policies for password management, multi-factor authentication. Yeah, definitely Microsoft, I think, sets themselves aside from those other cloud providers by doing some of those things. So, um, so Azure, you know, how are the use cases different, you know, small and medium sized business versus, you know, kind of what those enterprise level business clients are looking at for Azure? What are some of your thoughts around the different use cases?
Yeah, it's not even so much the different use cases. More Azure is bringing, the enterprise functionality to the SMB. So you know, Azure offers a lot of services, right? And for most of our clients, they need servers to run their applications. They need to protect these servers. They need to maintain them. They need them to be accessible to the mobile workforce. They need them to grow or shrink as the company grows. And um, Azure does that at an enterprise level for whether you're an enterprise or, you know, a small, you know, startup. It's You would be really hard pressed. You wouldn't ever really do that on your own as like a small, like 30 user firm or something like that.
Yep.
You know, the ability to build, you know, data centers that, you know, natively have encryption at rest and meet all the SAS 70 and HIPAA and other compliance needs, you just would never be able to do. And you're able to just kind of pluck out your little piece of that and have all that infrastructure behind you and pay as you go. So that enterprise piece of Azure, it's not so much scaring you away as an SMB as more attracting. You know, an enterprise might use some other high-end services like stand-up Kubernetes or something like that, but just because you're not doing that doesn't mean Azure's not right for you. Um,
Yep.
you know, so we're seeing a lot of people, move to infrastructure as a service in Azure as well. I think if you would have come to me a couple of years ago, I would have said, hold on, that might not be the best idea. But as Azure has grown, as internet speeds have gotten faster, as those hybrid technologies have gotten better, it's really integrated now. And moving servers up to the cloud is proving to be a really efficient within the business. And from a cost perspective, you're paying for only what you're using. So you got to watch it, but you can make it very cost effective for the business. So
Yeah, and I hear that loud and clear and see it in a lot of our customers, right? Especially those medium-sized businesses that are growing towards the enterprise space, right? Just you can turn that knob, increase your operating cost to be able to support new investments in technology, and the flexibility of that platform makes it so you can, satisfy those use cases for small and medium-sized businesses, but also, extend into the enterprise. So, and
yeah, and Josh, I'd be mistaken not to mention security here, right? That's at
yeah,
the forefront of everybody. The threats are real now, and everyone's a target. So, and that's not meant to scare. It's just kind of the landscape we live in.
yep,
Um,
yeah,
and Azure AD, or not Azure, but Azure with Azure AD and other technologies like Azure Information Protection, Cloud App Security, Azure Monitor, they kind of built this full stack security solution around their services.
yeah,
And again, you're getting that enterprise level functionality, for just the cost your business needs.
yeah. Even Intune is a part of that security platform, right? Being able to manage those remote devices, wipe them if they're lost, and things like that. Yep,
Yeah,
that
definitely. I was just
sure.
talking with a customer that we set up an Intune POC and like a proof of concept project for. We use acronyms a lot in IT. Sorry. It's uh, it's just the fact that they moved to a mostly remote workforce, right? And they didn't know how to manage those devices anymore. And Intune is what we're testing out. And just the fact that we could go in, press a button that said wipe, and they could know that that device, whether the person was returning it or not,
Yep.
was safe, and their business was, you know, okay with that, piece of hardware just being a brick now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So you had ended the prior dialogue with, kind of a thought on controlling costs, and I think that potentially some of our participants, I know a lot of customers that I interface with are worried about the total cost of ownership, back to the acronyms, a little TCO, and return on investment, ROI. As you look at, kind of the cost of Azure, how does it compare to other cloud providers? Is there some kind of justification process that, organizations have to go through to present to senior leadership on these types of solutions? Have you found anything that's been successful for yourself in the past, Peter?
yeah, I think as well as I do, cloud costs are just tricky. They
Yep.
they are. I, it's just, if anybody's jumped into the Microsoft licensing thing, that can get tricky too. And there's just so much there. So what I recommend to clients is taking the time to do that cost analysis. You're coming to an MSP like a Levity or somebody else and saying, hey, our strategy is to move to the cloud. I talked to my friend, at his business, and they're moving to the cloud and they love it. Take the time to do that cost analysis. Things like just picking like the specific VM types or the licensing and how that goes with it are pitfalls that can cost you lots of money. And how should I move to the cloud? Am I going to an infrastructure as a service strategy or as a software as a service strategy? How am I going to do that? That analysis to look at your current infrastructure, see the pieces that are in place, how they best move to the cloud, and what costs are associated with that, is a step worthwhile. You will save money. I've seen the same Azure estimates for the same solution, be 2, 3, 4 times different, just based on the knowledge of people picking the right things.
Yeah, and I know internally, we help our clients when we move over to Azure to, ensure that those checkpoints are in place, right? Was the solution engineered the way it was designed, as well as kind of doing some of the cost containment. But there's always that seeding cost, right? Where you're kind of utilizing data to be able to push it into the cloud. So a little bit heavier cost potentially on the first month, but making sure to use a partner that's really managing those, doing orchestrations to reduce costs is something that I highly recommend to our customers. So what, you've done a lot of Azure migrations of companies of a variety of sizes. What should customers that are doing an Azure migration, what should they expect? How long does it take? What should those overall expectations be as they walk through that process?
Yeah, so I could probably break that down into three high level phases. First, we just talked about a little bit, that assessment. I I still like to ask the question when a client says, "Hey, move me to Azure." I like to ask, "Should you?" Does this make sense? What will the cost be? What will it look like in Azure? So there's that step that we talked about, but that's the first part, and that's a lot of times the planning to do this is more time consuming than any other piece, right? The actual migration is kind of that second phase. That's the nuts and bolts of the technical. Hey, what tool am I using to migrate data? Is it something built into Azure like Azure Migrate, or am I using a third-party tool to move to a software as a service application? How am I doing that? And the tools there, as far that's where the business is affected, right? There might be some downtime where data is moving, but that's getting very minimal. If you were just to move servers, you can get it as close as turning off the servers, on premise and having them already synced up in Azure and turning them on in Azure. As long as you're making sure, you want to work with a provider that looks at everything though. If you just move servers to Azure and forget how people are going to connect to them and worry about your internal network, you're working with the wrong provider. But so you got to look at all those.
Yeah, it's going to really impact user experience if you're not thinking about how the desktops and laptops are going to connect. Yep.
Yeah, we keep in mind user experience all the time because that's the people using the systems. It has to work for them. And then the third and often overlooked is once you move to Azure, you're not really done. Moving services to any cloud provider doesn't mean all responsibility is removed. There's still maintenance, there's still potential backup concerns, there's definitely security operations to worry about and keeping everything healthy. So working with an MSP like Levity that understands not to just leave this alone is important as well. So once you migrate, there should be some sort of strategy already put in place to maintain and take care of these systems and watch cost, right?
What do you think as far as the ongoing maintenance? Some of the pitfalls that you've seen other customers fall into with respect to not maintaining those systems and some of the risks associated.
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind is backup. A lot of it depends on your cloud provider and where you're going with your data, but most cloud providers kind of come from the premise of your data is still your responsibility. We're providing you the service to run all this stuff, but the data is still your responsibility. So we've seen with Office 365 and other cloud providers like Google Drive and whatnot, these third-party cloud backup providers popping up over the last few years, and they're becoming very popular to back up your systems in the cloud. You may have a regulatory concern to keep data for more than a year, where the cloud provider has retention for like 2 weeks, right? So you're not meeting your regulatory demands, and you have to come up with something else. And that's often overlooked. People think, hey, my data's in the cloud, it's safe, secure, and not my responsibility anymore. And that's not always true. In fact, more often than not, it's not true. Say another one too is when you're moving servers up there, there's this in infrastructure as a service. This is where you're taking your Windows servers on premise or Linux servers, whatever you're using, and moving up to a cloud provider like Azure. You've taken out some responsibility, like no longer are you maintaining hardware and doing firmware updates for that or replacing it every 3 to 5 years. You've taken out that hypervisor layer. So your cost for that goes away, your maintenance for that goes away, but you still need to put security software on it. You still need to run updates on it. There's applications that are running on there, that software that's installed that needs to be patched and maintained. So moving to the cloud doesn't mean you're done.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Peter. The conversation today has been fantastic. We just had one question come in, and I'm confident you can field this one, Peter. Is how do you see you've got all of this information technology on-prem, and how do you determine what workload is appropriate to be able to run in the cloud versus maybe an on-prem system?
Sure, I've actually been doing a lot of those lately. I don't really haven't coined a name for it, but I'll do like a cloud migration assessment, right?
Yeah.
And that's somewhat customized to the business. IT systems between businesses have a lot of similarities, but they also have a lot of unique pieces. And that usually comes down to the applications you're running, the amount of data you're doing, the amount of users connecting to it. And we really do have to, get under the covers and look at what you're doing and pick the appropriate solution. So I'm answering this question kind of generally, but it's because it comes down to the individual business. You have to take that time to look at your pieces. Do you have an on-premise domain? Okay. What's the solution for that in the cloud? Do you have this on-premise application that, is your line of business application? Is there a good software as a solution service for that? Or do we got to move that to something like infrastructure as a server in Azure? And then how are people going to connect to it? So you got to run through all these pieces and see what the best piece is in the cloud, taking into concern cost, user experience, and all those different pieces that matter, right?
Yeah, that's great. And it kind of ties it all together, right? Where, there definitely needs to be some level of looking at that workload. And as you said at the very beginning, Azure can do pretty much everything, right? So you start with that assumption, you look at the business case, and then you can kind of design a solution around that. So, Peter, always a pleasure catching up. Thank you very much for joining today. Really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. For our attendees, for attending today's session, you can claim your coffee card by holding up your cell phone camera to the QR code that is now presented on your screen, and that will present you with the link. Or you could go to the Typeform. Please complete the survey, and you'll be able to get that coffee card. So I'll leave it up here for just 30 seconds. I feel like we should have some Jeopardy theme music streaming in now, Peter, while people do this survey. So the good news is it's a short one, and you'll get a cup of coffee at the end. So, all right. And then, for any of our participants that are interested in taking a next step, and Peter kind of hit on cloud readiness and looking at some of those specifics in your infrastructure that may make you, a good candidate to move your workloads up to Azure. part of our, surveying your infrastructure and making sure everything is healthy and designing that future state that could best serve your business needs is something that we call a Tech 360 or T360. You can find that service that we provide at alevity.com, alevityit.com/T360. I encourage you to take a look at it. Very valuable for businesses to be able to understand what they currently have and get some insights on what we could do to build you and get you into a better future state. And then, of course, as always, alevityit.com/events. We do these weekly coffee breaks. We have other lunch and learns and knowledge-based sessions that we host. Please go out there. We really want to continue to educate the community and talk about exciting topics. So join us. And just wanted to highlight, our next one that we're doing, a thought leadership free webinar, the future of work with Azure virtual desktops. So very exciting technology coming out from Microsoft, replacing a lot of your desktops internal, being able to centrally connect to a managed Azure virtual machine in the cloud. We're seeing a lot of people that are really intrigued by this software and can eliminate some pretty significant on-prem investments for hosting a Citrix or something like that. So please go out there, register for that session. It's gonna be a really exciting one. So, and then as a parting, again, Peter, thank you. Participants, thank you for joining. I hope you have a fantastic day and a great weekend in store. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.